Okay, let's just go ahead and start so we don't waste more time. This will be recorded anyways. Hi everyone, small audience today, but thanks to everyone who joined. My name is Dalia and I'm from Elastic's community team. And today we're here to hear from Miloš. He's an education engineer from Elastic and he's going to talk to us about dynamic presentations with Canvas. I'm going to record this meetup and later on it will be uploaded to YouTube. Yes, you can visit it again or share it with your peers. Thanks again. And if you're ever interested to speak at one of our meetups, please let us know. We're always open to hear from you. So you can always let us know if you're interested in that. Yeah, Miloš, please take ahead.
Thank you, Dalia. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining the meetup. Today's theme is going to be dynamic presentations with Canvas. We're going to give you a bit of an overview of what Canvas is and how to utilize it, but the main part of this whole presentation will be around the demo. So together we're going to build a Canvas presentation, and we're going to see how to add different elements and how to connect it with our underlying data source. Before I start with the presentation, I'm just going to do a quick introduction. So as Dalia said, my name is Miloš and I am an education engineer with Elastic. I'm based out of Amsterdam, Netherlands. And I teach people how to use different parts of Elastic Stack, how to implement it, and how to utilize it in the best possible way, depending on their use case. So if you have taken some trainings in the past, or if you're planning to take some trainings in the future, you will most probably see me in one of those trainings teaching you about different parts of Elastic Stack. My background is in software engineering, and I do have quite an experience with the stack itself as a developer. So if you do have any questions after the presentation, feel free to reach out, even if it's not related to Canvas. Okay, so let's start with the presentation itself, and let's talk a bit more about Canvas. So Canvas is a part of Kibana, and Kibana is a tool inside of the Elastic Stack that allows us to manage the stack, but also to visualize data, present data, and prepare it in such a way that it can be used by all of the stakeholders. Canvas represents one of the applications inside of Kibana. And first time we released it was back in version 6.5 when it was a part of beta feature. And then in the next version, we already released it to everyone as a part of fully matured feature. People tend to explain Canvas as a presentation tool, but I would really argue that this is so much more than a presentation tool. Typically with presentations, you have static data, so you add different assets such as images, text, and then the most usual thing to do is just present it and edit it before every presentation. Now, with Canvas, you can of course do all of that, but on top of that, you're able to utilize your underlying Elasticsearch data. So you're able to pull the data from your indices and create different graphs, create different data tables, and have everything updated as you keep indexing your data. It's a very useful tool. And the question now is, who is Canvas for? Do you have to be technical? Do you have to be a designer to use Canvas? And I really like the answer for this because Canvas is a very versatile tool. So personally, I prefer to do coding stuff, and I'm not very good at designing, but Canvas allows me to quickly make my presentation look nice, and at the same time code as well by connecting everything to underlying data sources. A lot of my colleagues are very good at design perspective. So they like to import a lot of assets. They like to create different vector images and make the presentation as nice as possible. And of course, this is also possible. You don't need to be technical. You don't need to know how to code in order to use Canvas. So if you're design oriented or tech oriented, or you generally present oftentimes to different stakeholders and you need more flexibility than either your default presentation tools or dashboards inside of Kibana, then Canvas is that nice sweet spot that allows you to combine different things and create very nice dynamic presentations. I'm going to give you a few examples of Canvas presentations that were built in the past before we jump into creating one ourselves. So this is one example that shows you the financial performance, and we are connecting this canvas with underlying source of data that now allows us to show different graphs, different metrics, and also import any kind of images, assets that we want to. Next one is very similar. So typically presentations are financial presentations and something that we could argue is fairly dry, okay? But what if you simply have a store and you're selling coffee? Well, Canvas can also be a solution for you. So you can import different assets in terms of graphics and then just connect them again with underlying source of data. Maybe you have a simple iPad that you're using in inside of your coffee store and you're clicking every time when you're selling a different type of coffee. All of that gets indexed inside of Elasticsearch, and now our dynamic presentation is simply reading the data from underlying index and showing everything in this nice slide. My personal favorite is race telemetry. So again, if you have some sensors that are reading data and sending to Elasticsearch, you can use Canvas to read that data in near real time and display it in a nice format. So in this particular scenario, we can see 4 different race cars with their average times, average lap times, best lap times, and so on. And last example that I'm going to give you before we move to the actual demo is from London Stansted Airport. So this is a scenario where we're also going to see how live data is able to change our Canvas presentation. As you can see here, this is of course fake data, so I had to emphasize that. But this data is supposed to represent different lanes inside of security part of London Stansted Airport. And in near real time, you're supposed to see how these different lanes perform. So how crowded they are and where you should go. If I start this live presentation, you should be able to see how the values change. So all of the different parts of our canvas are going to dynamically change based on the data that is getting inside of our Elasticsearch instance. Of course, we will see how to change the speed of the updating. So maybe we don't need to change this every second, but this is something that is going to be a part of the demo. Okay, I hope you had a nice introduction. I hope you now know a bit more what is the purpose of Canvas and why would we even want to consider it. And now I'm going to show you some of the capabilities. So we're going to jump into the demo. I believe you should be able to see my Kibana screen now. So in this Kibana screen, we're going to start from moving into Canvas section. So on my left-hand side, you're going to notice a lot of different applications as part of Kibana. So discover, visualize, and so on. Today, we're going to focus on Canvas only, but we're going to see how Canvas is also utilizing different visualizations in different parts of Kibana. So I'm going to go here, click on Canvas. And once Canvas loads, you're going to see different Canvas presentations that were created in the past. Some of them have been created by Elastic as a part of the demo set. So if I jump here into flights overview, you can see one slide that represents all of the different flights, inbound, outbound, and some stats about these flights in the past few days. So we have here roughly around a year of data. Clicking on every asset will allow us to import different data, change how the data is displayed, and then, of course, work with all of the assets. Now, let's go and start creating our own Canvas workpad. So I'm going to go and click on Create Workpad. And as with real life, we also start with an empty canvas, blank canvas. So let's look around a bit and make sure that we know what are the different segments of this canvas. First, we're going to name our canvas. So let's make it my Meetup canvas May. And then you're able to choose the size. Of course, the size by default can vary, but let's keep it as 720p, which is a common one to be presented in different screen sizes. Okay, so we start with an empty canvas. The first thing I'm going to show you is how to add additional slides. Imagine this as any other presentation tool. So we have an empty slide. I'm going to go to page 1 here, click on it, and start adding additional slides as a part of my workpad. So here's slides 2. I'm going to add slide 3, 4, and so on. Now, as we will see later, you can also clone these slides. So if you created a few things on slide 3 and you just want to clone it, you're going to click on this clone button and add one more slide. Of course, here they're all empty, so we're not going to spend too much time working with it. We're just going to get rid of excessive ones. So today, let's go with 2 slides and create some assets on these slides. Okay. One more thing that I will want to show you is this cogwheel. This is a place where we're going to change different settings inside of Canvas. So by default, you have to refresh your Canvas manually. What does that mean? That means that if I add some data, if I ingest additional data, I do have to go click on it and either change to auto refresh interval or directly from this view, simply go and click refresh data. Apart from that, I can also cycle full screen pages. So in case you want to keep your presentation ongoing on a screen somewhere, you can set the cycle interval and then have slides changing every few seconds, minutes, or whatever you prefer. Okay, so let me go here and start creating some assets inside of the screen. First thing that we can do is we can manage assets, but currently we haven't created anything in the past. So the best thing that we can do is go click on add elements and start creating some elements ourselves. Now, this might remind you of your typical visualization section of Kibana, where you can find many different things, such as data table, horizontal bar charts. But apart from visualizations that need to use some underlying data, you're also going to find graphic assets, such as regular static image, repeating an image n number of times based on certain metric, image reveal. So maybe if we sold only 50% of our daily quota, we're going to have this mug filled only halfway. Progress semicircle, many other different things. And we're going to test some of them. So let's start simple and let's go and create a metric. Every time when you create an asset, you're going to notice that this asset already comes with some demo data pre-filled and it displays something already. So in this case, we have a metric that says 13 countries. Typically, when we add an asset, the first thing that we do is we go into data section and make sure that we change the underlying source of data. In this case, we have demo data. So data that is delivered with Kibana and Elasticsearch when you first install it. But we don't want to work with demo data today. We want to use some underlying data inside of our Elasticsearch instance. Now, as of version 7.7, this is the latest version released just a few days ago. You can use different ways to ingest or create your assets from Elasticsearch indices. Elasticsearch SQL directly using Elasticsearch documents, demo data that we've seen before, or using timeline. So let's go and start with Elasticsearch SQL. And here we can see the SQL comment that has been used in order to display some demo data. So we said select everything from Kibana sample data flights. Now let's get rid of this. We want to use something else. And we're going to work with logs today. So we want to display live logs, changes in these logs, and understand what is currently happening in our system. I know from checking before that I have a set of indices here that store different logs, and they all start with logs_server and then enumerated with different numbers. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start writing my SQL statement by saying, okay, I want to select and I want to get the sum of total response size from all of my documents. So I want to see how much total response I delivered in the past period. I know that I have field response size in this index, so this is just a regular field. And then I want to return that as sum total response. Okay, reading from an index called logs server. And because I know there are multiple indices, I'm going to use a star as a wildcard. Okay, so this is my statement here. And I'm going to first click on preview data. Okay, preview data now shows me that indeed this statement is correct, and this statement is going to return a number. This is very useful because if we do make a mistake, so let's say here I'm going to click on response without the E in the end, and I'm going to preview data. Kibana is going to tell us, okay, you're trying to run a statement that doesn't make sense. And on top of that, it is also going to suggest maybe you meant response size because this field is very similar to what I actually typed. So let me go and fix this quickly. Preview the data, everything seems well, and I'm going to go and save this. Okay, what happened now? We get an error. In this case, the error is expected. So even though we've chosen the data, we need to go back to display and we need to tell to Canvas, okay, this is what you need to display. Currently we have unique and then none of the fields is selected. We need to fix this. So we're going to go click here and choose value instead of unique. And then we're going to choose that sum total response that was returned by using the SQL statements. Okay, this already looks much better, but still we don't really get the context of this. So what is this number? 95 billion, 350 million, and so on countries. Or this is definitely something I want to fix. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to format this number. What does this number represent? Well, response size is in bytes. So this is the total size of bytes that have been processed from my servers. This is a lot of bytes. So I probably want to choose a different way to format it. I'm going to click on bytes here. And now Canvas automatically chooses the most convenient metric here, the most convenient value. So instead of bytes, we're now working with gigabytes. Okay, and of course the label, this is not countries, this is total response size. And now I want to play with some design elements as well, okay? I've done the job in terms of connecting to Elasticsearch index. I pulled the appropriate data, but now I want to make it look at least a bit nicer than it currently is. So definitely I want it to be a bit bigger. I want to work with larger fonts here because it's a slide. So I'm going to also increase the size of this, and let's make it a bit nicer in terms of color as well. So I want it different here. So I'm going to change the color as well. And I'm going to position it here on my slide. One more thing that I want to do is I want to have a bit more decimal points behind this size. Okay, 88.8 gigabytes is fine, but I really care about the exact number. So how do I go and fix this? Well, remember what I said in the beginning. Canvas allows you to work with buttons and clicks, so you don't have to be technical. You don't need to know how to write code. But then at the same time, if you do want to take more control, we allow you to do that. So you can click on your assets and you can go inside of the Express editor in your bottom right corner. When you go inside of the Express editor, you're going to see the syntax that defines this particular asset. Now, I'm not going to go in depth here. So if you go and click on Learn Expression Syntax, you're going to see a lot of details on the syntax itself. It is not hard to learn, but there is a certain learning curve involved. So here, I'm just going to go into what has already been added. So ES SQL or Elasticsearch SQL statements that I've written before, then mathematics behind it and metrics, total response size, and then metric and label font that I've been using. So let's go and find here a metric format, so 0.0. Okay, I want to have one more decimal point. So let me go and try to add 0 here and then run. Okay, this looks much better now. So now I have 88.77 gigabytes inside of my logs, total size of responses from my logs. Okay, I'm going to close this. I've changed my assets. And now I'm going to move on and continue with adding some more assets here. Okay, so I have a metric. Let's go and add a data table. Similar situation as before. So what can we see? We can see some sample data inside. I'm not going to go into as much details as I did before, so we can wrap up the whole demo in a decent amount of time. So again, what do I always start from? I start from data source. So I'm going to go inside of data, and I'm going to choose again Elasticsearch SQL. Now, what is the statement that I want to write here? Well, I want to show some fields. So I want to show countries that from which the users came from. I want to show how many unique visits I had, and then I will want to group all of that in descending order by the count. So I start with selecting some fields. I want to select geo IP dot country name. So this is another field that we can find inside of our index, and I want to have a count as total from, again, we're using logs server index, and then we're going to group everything by, so here I can also go and copy GeoIP country name, and then I also want to order everything by total in descending order. Okay, let me go and preview this. Okay, we have an error here as well. Expecting by, so let's go and quickly check this. Select the GeoIP country name. We have comma count star as total from log server. This seems fine as well. Group, okay, we have a dot here, so perfect. Now we preview and we see the data source, how it is going to be released when we create this. Okay, this seems well, so I'm going to go and save it. And now I have my table in place. So I'm going to do again some small design changes. So jumping back into how I'm going to display this table. I only care about top 10, so I'm not going to allow paging. How am I going to fix this? Well, table style, pagination, turn off pagination. I only care about top 10. I don't need to jump into following pages. And now, interesting thing here, when you choose element style, you can add some CSS. So again, if you're more on the tech side, you know CSS syntax and you want to take full control of how your table is going to be displayed, I can now add some CSS stuff here. Now I'm just going to copy and paste. I'm not going to type everything here, but let's say here's some simple stuff in terms of how the border is going to look like, background color, width, text align, and border collapse. So let me go and apply this. And now my table instantly looks a bit different from what we had before. Okay. Now I'm going to add a couple of more assets here and already start seeing my slide here becoming more rich with details and definitely nicer looking as I also change the display elements. So I'm going to go and add an element this time, and I'm going to work with horizontal bar chart. Again, what do we expect? We expect to get some sample data. This is fine, but we want to use our own data source. So I'm going to jump back into possible sources of data, choose Elasticsearch SQL. And this time I'm going to, again, copy the whole statement instead of typing. So we'll also save up some time. So when we look at this, what do we have here? Select original URL. Okay, so we're working still with log server index pattern. I'm choosing the original URL, and I want to have count as well as count of URLs from that index pattern. And I'm grouping now on the original URL, ordering by count, so number, and then in descending order, limiting to 10. Let me preview the data. Okay, seems that it looks exactly what I want to have. So I'm going to go save this. And again, we get an error. Why does the error happen? You need to choose inside of the display, what do you want to present? So your asset now has the data, but it needs to know where to put what. So typically on x-axis, when we talk about this, we're going to put value, and then we're going to have count of URLs. Whereas on y-axis, we're going to choose value, but this time original URL. Okay, this starts making a bit more sense now. So on the y-axis, we see the actual URLs that were visited, and on the x-axis, we see the number of visits. So let me now go and also choose how the color is going to be displayed. So I want it to be based on original URL so that every original URL has a different color. Okay, I'm going to go and leave this here. And I am going to now move on to the second slide. So first slide looks fine for now. I do want to add a couple of images later, but now let me jump into slide 2. Now, what I can do here is, instead of starting assets again, I can do a couple of things. I can either choose my assets and then save that given asset, so I can reuse it in any other Canvas visualization or presentation that I'm creating. Okay, how would I actually go with that? With element options, I can save as a new element, or I can simply say, well, let me clone this element here because I only need it in this Canvas presentation. And then I'm just going to go and cut it and paste it inside of my second slide. Okay. In the second slide now, instead of writing everything, I'm just going to change some things. And I'm going to start creating the metric in the second slide. So what do I want to do now? Well, second slide should represent different source of data. So I don't want to use log server data anymore. I want to use Apache logs. How am I going to do this? As always, go to data. This time, let's choose some response fields as sum total response from, instead of log server, I'm just going to use my Apache index pattern. Okay, preview data. Yep, this seems like a normal number. Now notice an interesting thing. When I click on save here, as we mentioned before, so Canvas is going to recognize the ballpark of my metrics. So here we don't need to represent in gigabytes because it would be 0.0 something, but we're going to automatically have it presented in megabytes. So total response size from Apache logs is now 60.2 megabytes. Okay, 2 more things that I will want to add to my presentation, and then we're going to wrap it up. I want to show you how to use timeline. Now, let's go and create a line chart. Line charts is another element that we can add inside of our Canvas presentation. So I'm going to scroll down, find line charts, and again, I expect to have already some sample data. So I'm going to extend this and I'm going to choose the data. Now, instead of SQL that we have been using in all of the previous assets, I'm going to jump back into timeline and start writing some timeline statements. Now, for the ones that haven't been using timeline in the past, timeline is a syntax that allows you to work with time series data. So you can create different line charts, you can render your time series data inside of different graphs, overlap different metrics elements, and also on top of that, shift the time series. So maybe you want to see how does your data set compare to previous year, month to month, one-on-one relationship. You can do that as well with timeline. Now, similarly as before with expression editor, I'm not going to go into details of timelines. So the syntax is something that you do need to learn, but let's do something simple. So here we're going to say, okay, .es, so I'm accessing my Elasticsearch. I want to access index pattern called Apache. I can just use APA star. And then what is the query? Well, I want to look at GeoIP dot country code 2, and FR is for France. And I also want to show this metric, which is sum, and then looking at the field bytes. Okay, so very simple syntax where each function is using the dot notation. So I'm going to go and preview this data. Okay, so I am getting some data. So I'm going to go and save this. Now, of course, when we do the data, we also need to choose the display values. So here on x-axis, I want to have the value of timestamp, showing the months. And on y-axis, I want to have value, and what is the only option here, label or value. So I'm choosing the value that I've written before inside of the canvas. Now, quickly on assets. I'm just going to double check something with regards to this statement, because it does seem that the data underlying is not okay. So we're going to go and save this again. Yeah, something is missing value. Okay. Okay, we're going to leave it as it is. It turns out that some data is not appearing here, but our chart should have all the values here when we're reading by using timeline expression. Okay, so going back to first slide, I want to show you how we add different assets in terms of images. Okay, so add element and choosing an image here. Now, by default, again, you're going to see a nice Elastic logo. So I'm going to keep this logo here, okay? But I also want to add something custom. So let me go and clone it first, because it's easier than just adding a new element. So I'm just going to clone this element here. And now use image uploads. Now here you have two very convenient options. You can either import directly from your machine, or you can click a link and then provide a link to any image that will then be pulled to your canvas. Now I'm going to import here, and I'm going to access a very interesting GIF here that I'm now going to put to my second slide. Okay, so a bit of a simple visualization telling us that some logs are getting inside of our system. Okay, so this is what we've created here. I'm going to add one more metric, and then we're going to see how this dynamic presentation actually works in the background when we have some data flowing inside of our system. So cloning again this metric here. And I also want to see, instead of total response size, I want to see here average size per response. So how do I do that? Well, I want to have average from runtime in milliseconds, and then I want to use log server as well. So if we double check here, we should see in preview data, okay, I have the proper metric, so I'm going to save this. I need to go back to display and choose here average response. Okay, 361 is average response size, and I also want to change what is going to be displayed, average response size. Okay, so now I'm going to show you, we're going to fake some logs, we're going to fake some data, and we're going to see how all of these visualizations change in real time. Let me scale the screen to fit the window, okay? And I'm going to set refresh rate to be 2 seconds. Okay, now you should be able to see a very thin line here just below the URL in my browser that constantly keeps refreshing every 2 seconds. Now we don't have anything changing, so let's go and delete one of our indices. So we're going to delete log server 3 index. Okay, we go back to our canvas here, and we see after 2 seconds something refreshed. So now we have 59 gigabytes of data, average response size is 359, and then we have countries with their values. So let's say we start from there and we start using our servers. So they're up and running, they're generating some logs. I'm going to fake that by reindexing some data. So I'm starting this reindexing job. We're going back to our canvas. And now we see how, without us doing anything, every 2 seconds, we have additional data flowing into the system. The graphics are changing as well. The table has new values for top 10 countries. And all of that is happening in the background without us having to change anything. And this is indefinite process. So we can just put this, for example, to full screen and keep it as our presentation anywhere inside of our office, looking at how much data we process per day. Of course, these are some simple examples where we're looking at the most frequently visited blog posts, countries from where our users are coming from, and so on. But you can connect this to anything that brings value to you. So maybe that will be unique users visiting, or requests that have 404 status code, or anything other than that you need to quickly react to. At some point, we're going to reach here a full data set. So we're going to reindex all of the data, and then these changes will stop. Okay, this has been mostly it with regards to the demo. Last question that you might have is, what do we do now after we created this? Well, it is automatically saved, so we can just go back to Canvas, keep doing other stuff, and access this presentation at any time, or we can share it. Now, there are multiple ways to share it. One of them is to download it as JSON, which simply means, okay, I'm going to download a JSON that describes this whole canvas, and I'm going to share it with anyone who has the same data, and they will be able to run it locally. I can generate a PDF report. So the whole canvas that I have is simply a PDF. So again, you can use it in that format as a presentation, or you can share it on the website, which will now generate a piece of code, a snippet of code in form of JavaScript that you can place within the HTML section on your website. And then this will constantly access and load your canvas directly from your Elasticsearch cluster. Now, bear in mind that, of course, due to security of data, when you share this code, no one can access your data. They're just able to get the information from your Canvas workpads. Okay, that should be it in terms of the demo. I'm going to quickly go back to my presentation and make sure that I haven't skipped here on ways to use it. So of course, we mentioned all of these. And last thing that I'm going to say here is that Canvas is something that is very mature, but it's also a work in progress. So do expect a lot of new things, a lot of new features. I can give you a bit of early information. Some of you might think, okay, what happens now with using regular visualization? So why would I have to create separate visualization inside of Canvas? Or can I use query DSL? Why do I have to use Elasticsearch SQL? All of these things were suggested, and this is something that we are working on. So a lot of new things will come to Canvas. If you don't find something that you currently need, bear in mind that in the following versions, you will see a lot of new features added and a lot of improvements. So that is all actually for me today. Thank you everyone for attending. I am going to look through the questions now. So if you have any questions, please feel free to pop it in the chat, and we're going to spend some time answering these questions.
Well, thank you so much, Miloš. It was great. Let's go ahead and answer the Q&A questions now. Do you have visibility on them, or should I read them to you?
I can see the questions, yeah.
Okay. So the first one, how does Canvas compare to classic Kibana dashboard, and how would it be right to say that it's a bit like Microsoft Power BI dashboards?
Yeah, sure. So as Ali said, so how does Canvas compare to classic Kibana dashboard? Would it be right to say that it is a bit like Microsoft Power Business Intelligence dashboards? Okay, so as mentioned in the beginning, Kibana dashboards are very good with connecting to underlying data. So of course, they're based on aggregations. So you can have a lot of additional tweaks in terms of displaying the data, but you don't have a lot of freedom on other assets. So I can't really compare it with the Microsoft Power BI here because I don't necessarily have a lot of experience with that tool. But I can tell you that Canvas is a really nice balance between being able to do a lot of tech stuff. So majority of things that you can achieve with dashboards, and of course, many more coming in the future. And then at the same time, using a lot of assets that you can import from different sources. Mostly we're talking about graphics here. So a bit more freedom, and I would say a bit more capabilities for the ones that are not necessarily technical. I hope that answers the question. Let's jump to the next one. So how to query the data from multiple indices from Canvas? Very good question. So you have multiple options here. As we've seen during the demo, every asset is able to connect to any index or index pattern that you have inside of your Elasticsearch. So it is sufficient to just define that index pattern in the SQL statement or particular index and display that in assets. If you're wondering if it's possible to use multiple index patterns inside of a single asset, for now that is not supported, but very soon, hopefully when we start using the time series visual builder, then you will be able to see how these things connect. One thing that I maybe haven't mentioned during the presentation is that SQL statements that you can write inside of Canvas can be very, very complicated. So you don't need to rely just on simple stuff that I demoed here. If you work through some examples and tutorials, you will find that you can do joins, you can do a lot of stuff that you can do with SQL inside of the Canvas. So bear that in mind. This is just a little preview, a little taste of Canvas, but capabilities are much, much higher. Okay, yeah, sorry, Daria.
Last one.
Oh yeah, sure. So from Arya, one thing we are really interested in now is how we can fetch data by correlating in something like a SQL join query. Yeah, so I think that was partially answered with the previous question, and you answered it yourself inside of the question. So SQL join query is something that you can do inside of Elasticsearch SQL. So you can simply join the data by using these statements. Yeah, I hope that answers in the question. Of course, if you have any other questions, we do have time. So if you're interested about anything, what features coming in next Canvas release updates and when? I can't give you the exact dates because, yeah, I can't guarantee that, of course. This is up to the product team. But as you know, we release probably every month or two minor version. So this is something that is the trend in the past year or two. And then again, unofficially looking at the trends from past few years, you can see kind of an unwritten rule that there is a one major version every year. So I would expect even in this year, a lot of new things, not particularly sure in which order, but things that I mentioned before. So introducing existing visualizations and being able to use query DSL is something that we're focusing on, and it will hopefully be released very soon.
Cool. Any more questions from anyone else? All right, then. Okay. Well, Miloš, thank you very much for the great presentation. Thanks everyone for joining. We're gonna upload this to YouTube. We now have a dedicated channel in YouTube where you can watch all of the meetups that we've done if you're interested and you missed something. So yeah, thank you. And if you're interested in ever giving a talk, please let us know. Please keep following our events online and keep joining our meetups. Thanks, guys. I wish you a great week and a great weekend.
Thank you, everyone. Pleasure to have you. Have a nice end of the week.